Okay, so this diagram illustrates the impact of the indirect tax. So in your exam, you need to explain what the consequences are to the different stakeholders, so producers, consumers, and the government. So we start from the beginning, as we do on all our diagrams. So in the beginning, the equilibrium price was PE, and the equilibrium quantity supplied and demanded was QE. However, the government decides to introduce an indirect tax of AB, okay, so the difference between here, or PP and PT, okay. So as long as you've got the idea that it's between these two, that's fine. This increases the cost for producers to supply. So some producers who were willing and able to supply at the price PE can now no longer supply, so they exit the market. So this shifts the supply curve to the left from S to ST. This is bad for consumers as they now pay a higher price. Okay, so the price moves from PE to PT. And because of the higher price, this acts to reduce the quantity demanded from QE to QT, forming the new equilibrium point here. Producers are also not too happy as they have to pay some of the tax. Okay, not too much because it's relatively inelastic. So the consumers pay most of this tax. However, the producers have to pay this amount of tax. So effectively, they get a lower price now. Where they used to get PE, they now get PP. This means both consumers and producers have less surplus. Okay, so before the tax, consumers received all of this surplus down to the equilibrium price and all the way up. And producers received all of this surplus, okay? But now, consumers do not receive this, the government receives this, and producers do not receive this part of their surplus because they're paying that to the government in the form of tax. Producers can pass most of the tax burden of this good onto consumers because it's being relatively elastic, and therefore consumers are less responsive to this increase in price that the tax given. So the producers can pass most of it on to the consumers, but they still have to pay a little bit of it themselves, okay, highlighted by the red square. However, the government receives tax revenue of PT, A, B, PP, so this represents the total tax revenue that the government gets. And then finally, there is a deadweight loss to society, so of A, B, C, so this triangle here. Now this is a deadweight loss of society because this used to represent consumer surplus and producer surplus that society used to benefit from. But because there's less being quantity demanded and quantity supplied, okay, so there's less being supplied and less quantity demanded, so now the quantity demanded is QT, okay, society is missing out this triangle that it used to produce and consume, that it's not producing anymore. Okay, so if I flick across to here, this shows that sort of in writing. So the original equilibrium price is PE and quantity is QE. Then the government decides to introduce an indirect tax, AB. This increases the cost for producers to supply. Some producers were able or willing to supply at PE can now no longer supply, so exit the market, shifting the supply curve to the left from S to ST. This is bad for consumers as they now pay a higher price of PT, and because of the high price, this acts to reduce the quantity demanded from QE to QT. Producers are also not too happy as they have to pay some of the tax, and therefore the price they effectively get is PP, which is lower than the original equilibrium price of PE. So this obviously affects their total revenue also. This means both consumers and producers have less surplus now. Producers can pass most of the tax burden of this good onto consumers because it is relatively inelastic. So the opposite will be true. If it's elastic, producers will have to pay most of it because if they increase the tax too much, it's going to lead to a higher change in quantity demanded, which they don't want. So they will take most of the tax burden when it's elastic. Okay. Therefore, consumers take most of the tax burden. However, the government receives tax revenue PT, AB, BP, which could be redistributed and spent elsewhere. Also, The triangle ABC represents a deadweight loss to society, as this used to be part of producing consumer surplus, but no one enjoys this welfare anymore, as only QT units are supplied and demanded. So that gives you an idea of the sort of explanation you need to do to get full marks. It's very mechanical. You just have to get used to using all the labels to help your explanation. Okay. Right. Any questions, please ask. Cheerio for now. Bye bye.